he's signing these things and he's looking up and he says, "You're probably just going to sell all these on your table, aren't you?" I said, "No, Ray, I'll wait till you're dead." He died laughing. And so all day long he would come over and check every couple of hours, like, "I'm still alive." He was a terrifically funny guy, and I miss him a lot, even though I didn't have that tight a relationship with him. But he was just an awesome fellow, outside of being the most amazing film technician for special effects ever.
I mostly remember seeing him in person at the Atlanta Fantasy Fair. I think it's
1981. I think it was 81. Yeah, it was the first time I ever met him.
Yes,
81 or 82.
Anybody see him there at that time? He was just incredibly patient and just fascinating. He would just go on in great detail about all the different kinds of effects he would do. He did not just stop motion animation, but he called it dynamation, and it encompassed several different techniques for film visual effects. And a lot of things that they're doing now, of course, are just more high-tech versions of what he was doing back then. He did a lot of the original what we would call blue screen now, but he was doing it with images sometimes on surfaces that were lined up very carefully so that they would look as though that they were a matte process, because you have an actual physical insertion of something. And you might remember the princess appearing to shrink in the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. That was a fascinating effect. It wasn't stop motion animation, so it wasn't just stop motion animation, but he took great care, of course, with his stop motion animation. And his whole career was kind of based on, well, the origins of his career was kind of a family affair. His father actually helped him with a lot of the very fine armatures that he had to have inside of the skeletons. And his mother helped him with the fairy tale films that he did early on with a lot of the costuming. So
got it for a new coat.
yeah,
That's right. That's
yeah.
right.
Okay, Bill.
For the cape.
So Ray never lost his childlike sense of wonder. I remember at that Wonderfest, Ray and I were both guests that year, and I walked in the lobby and Ray greeted me and he said, "Bill, you've got to see my room. It's huge." My favorite Harryhausen story is we had a loose group in Los Angeles called the Dinosaur Society of Los Angeles, and we get together about every couple months or so, and whoever was the famous paleontologist visiting at the time, they would be our guest speaker. Well, we didn't have a paleontologist one time. Ray was in town, so Ray became our guest for that evening, and he came over with Jim Danforth. And so here are the two guys who knew more about special effects than any other two people on the planet. And our friend Don Gluck, who was part of the club, had brought all these old Georges Méliès films from around the late 1890s and 1900 and was showing them. And so sitting there in the dark watching these ancient silent films, and I'm hearing the two greatest masters of special effects, Ray and Jim, going, "How do you do that?"
That's great.
One of the things that I had already heard about this, he kind of had it was kind of I don't want to say standard thing that he used to do at the conventions. He'd bring a large trunk with him full of a lot of his animated creatures and stuff, and would bring them and put them on display. And I was at the Famous Monsters convention in Crystal City, Virginia in the early 90s, and he brought that trunk out, man, and it was just like, man, the Smithsonian came to you. Especially my personal favorite one is Shiva from Golden Voyage of Sinbad, and to see that thing in real life, that was amazing. So
A lot of those models were smaller than you would think, but incredibly detailed and movable.
And that's one of the many factors about Ray's work that makes it so amazing is the incredible detail on the models themselves.
blow them way up on the screen, and they work.
But, My favorite story by Ray, I guess I'm going to kind of combine two stories into one here real quickly, but I'd gone to the Archon convention in St. Louis, Archon 20, and they had the whole backpack there. They had Forey Ackerman and Ray Bradbury and Ray Harryhausen were all there. And my nephew was with us, and he was 12 or 13 years old. And we got separated. And I know 12 or 13 is not like 5 or 6, but you know, he wasn't my son, he's my nephew, and I was feeling very protective of him. And so I looked around and Joshua wasn't there. And so here he comes, a couple minutes later, I see him coming toward me, and I'm about ready to chew him out, and or fuss at him. And he said, I said, "Where have you been?" He said, "Ray Harryhausen's waiting in the dealer's room to have a photo made with you." he just walked right up. You've seen Ray in the dealer's room, walked right up to him and say, "Hey, my uncle's a big fan of yours. I know you'd like to have a photo. Can I go get him?" And so he asked Ray to just wait in the dealer's room. He would have found me somewhere. He comes and gets me, takes me back to the dealer's room, and there's Ray standing right exactly where he said he would be. And so we got our photo made, which is my all-time favorite photo. And I was just in the planning stages of working on the dinosaur movie book at that time. So naturally, I can't miss this chance to ask Ray about it. So I said, Mr. Harryhausen, I'm working on this, exhaustive history of dinosaur films, and obviously I'd love to interview you, for the book. He said, "Well, that will be fine." And so we, made tentative plans to get back in touch, a little bit after the convention. So 2 or 3 weekends later, I'm lounging around the house on Saturday morning, and the phone rings, and I pick it up and say, "Hello," and voice, "Hello, is this Mark?" "Yes." "Well, this is Ray Harryhausen."
I like that we're all doing impressions of Ray.
Yours were better than mine, but I need Donnie Waddell here. He does.
Yes, he does. He does.
And I was literally like I was in a bad comedy sketch. I was like,
Uncle Caduce is coming.
well, I literally stammered. "Mr. Harryhausen, I appreciate you calling me back." And and then the epilogue to this whole story is we did this about an hour and a half telephone interview, and I would fax him. He used fax rather than email, and I would fax him drafts of the chapters, which he would then look at and say, "Yes, you got everything right. Nothing wrong. Everything looks good." And if there's any changes, he'd fax them back to me. So we polished all the 4 chapters of the 4 dinosaur films he did. And then when it was all done, then he was the guest at Wonderfest in 2003, I think the last time. And he, of course, obviously was the guest of honor at the closing banquet on Sunday night. And I got a chance to present him with a copy of the book in person in front of everybody. So that was kind of a neat conclusion to the whole thing.
So your interview with him, did you cut out all the humna?
I didn't start the tape recorder until after I had somewhat gathered myself.
Yeah.
Does this nephew of yours hire out? Because there's some people who are having trouble finding out there in the floor. He sounds like he's good at it.
Yeah, he is. He just walks up to somebody and makes friends with them.
Well, I think that I'm flooded with so many memories, and some of them are just tiny little memories, but most of them center around, just as Bill said, that sense of wonder and sense of playfulness and that childlike wonder, especially when I was fortunate enough to be around Forey and both Rays. And they became, once again, those teenagers who were members of the Los Angeles Science Fantasy Society there in the little brown room at Clifton's cafeteria, and how much fun that they would have. And some of those memories go back to when I met Ray was at that convention in Crystal City, which was May of 1993, and he died almost 20 years after that. He died May the 7th of this year, so almost 20 years after that. And they would talk about Kong, they would talk about Fay Ray. And, someone asked Ray Harryhausen, I think it was at that convention, did they ever do any, promotional tie-ins, merchandise or whatever? He said, "Oh, when they did Clash of the Titans, they did some sort of cuddly Medusa." And Forey immediately starts going, "Cuddly Medusa, cuddly Medusa." And the 3 of them just go. And at the banquet here at DragonCon in 1998, when both Rays and Forey were here among a lot of other people, and Ray Bradbury got the first Julie, And then he also got a guest of honor. And Ray Harryhausen hadn't gotten anything yet. And Ray Bradbury goes by him and he pushes him and he says, "Hey, I got 2. You got none." And that case of models, I ran through the streets of Chicago at the Chicago International Film Festival, which was held the same weekend as Resin Heads, and Ray was a guest at both events. And he handed me that case and he said, "Run," because we had to make it to a bus in time to get back to the convention. And I can never relate the pressure I felt with all those models. But probably one of my favorite memories of Ray that goes back to that sense of wonder and how he never lost touch with that kid who saw King Kong was here at DragonCon in 1998 when First Fandom had so much terrific programming. How many of you were there in 1998 when they were all here? And Julie Schwartz and so many others. They did a screening of King Kong in one of the bottom rooms of this hotel or the Hyatt. And we all went, and it was at midnight, and Ray Harryhausen was going to introduce King Kong. And it was shown on a television about this wide and about this tall. And he was so disheartened. He said, "You're not going to experience it. You need to see it, like Ray Bradbury says, where Kong's bigger than you are." And he was kind of apologizing for the experience, saying, "I'm not even sure this is worth your watching this at midnight." And he was so tired. And I was standing near the door, and he told me bye, and he slipped out the door as they were putting the movie on. And as the room went dark, the door opened, he slipped in and stood beside me, and I said, "Is everything okay?" And he said, "I can't go to bed until I hear Max Steiner's opening music one more time." And he did. He stayed through the opening titles, and then he slipped back out. And just that spiritual connection he had with that film and with that sense of wonder, just, it gives me chills today.
These guys were really fans at heart, and that's why they could relate to fans, I think, so well.
I love seeing Fari Ackerman do his pantomime of the opening of Kong. I guess it's in Don Bluth's film or Dinosaur Movies or something, where Fari's on camera and he's doing trying to explain how great the opening is, and you hear this music and it's dum dum dum, and only Fari could do it like that.
Well, Bill, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the sequel to Seven Voyages.
So would I.
Oh, sure. Drop a few details on that, and do you think anything will ever, like a novel out of a graphic novel, any sort of thing?
I'm thinking about doing either a graphic novel or just a pure text novel. So, as I mentioned, when I was a kid, my parents were huge movie nuts. My mom would never miss a horror film or a musical. My dad would never miss a Western or a science fiction film. And we'd go to the drive-in 2 or 3 times a week, so that meant 4 to 6 movies right there. And then on Saturday, my mom would drop my brothers and I off at the local walk-in theater, and we'd see another double bill. And in the Sunday paper, there was this big full-page color advertisement with scenes from Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, and it just blew my mind. I think I was about 8 years old. And so I knew that was the movie I wanted to see on Saturday. And as soon as the film was over, I ran to the lobby, called my mom, and said, "Mom, don't pick us up. We're going to see it a few more times." So later, I met Ray, and we became friends. And Richard Jones, who produced a documentary on Ray, had come up with an idea. He said, "We would like Ray's career to go out with a bang and do one more film after Clash of the Titans, a sequel to The Seventh Voyage." He says, "Would you be willing to collaborate with Ray on that?" I said, "What, are you kidding?" And so I got together with Ray, and I said, "Ray, give me a list of every creature you always wanted to animate, but never had a chance to, or was cut from the film," and so he did. He gave me that list. So I wrote a preliminary treatment that incorporated all those creatures. The idea was that Ray was not actually going to physically stop motion animate each of these sequences himself, because he had retired. But our idea was to have him be the special effects supervisor and hand off each creature to a different special effects outfit who would animate it as a tribute to Ray. And by that, I knew we were going to get absolutely superb work, because everybody just loved Ray and wanted to do their best for him. So I came up with a story that focuses on both Sinbad and Barani. As you remember at the end of the film, Barani becomes the cabin boy. Well, now Barani has grown up and he's become the captain of his own ship, and he's fallen in love with the daughter of Sinbad and the princess. And they end up back on Colossus, and so it's the tale of Barani rescuing his fiancée, just the way that Sinbad rescued his fiancée, and what Sinbad has to deal with now that he is he's sort of the emperor of Baghdad. He's running Baghdad, but he's much older now. But he misses all that adventure and excitement that he used to have as a younger man. And once Sakura comes back to life, he's back in it again, and he's loving it, but he's a lot older. So it's not as easy for him as it used to be.
That sounds great. Well, I hate that it was never produced, because it sounds like it would have been an amazing film, but I would love to see a graphic novel. That would be amazing. It really would.
Yes. Are you aware of the Master of Magic's books?
Yeah.
They're absolutely some of the best books that have ever been done on Harryhausen. It's a 3-volume set. The last 2 volumes came out before the first. The first volume is been printed and it's on its way to this country now. And we've got the treatment for that film in that book, and some of the illustrations I did for that as well.
That's great. And that's the only one that you're going to be able to find on, because the other 2 have long been sold out. You would have to grab them out of the cold dead hands of the guys who have them, because they were very small press, very limited edition kind of thing. I don't have them myself, and I'm not thrilled about that. But I do have. There were some great books that Ray did in the last 5 or 10 years. Yeah, exactly. Art of Ray Harryhausen and his visual autobiography, right? And those are still available and highly recommended. I really like, because they even moved there. Great.
And just another thing about what kind of guy Ray was, he was deep into working on An Animated Life when I got in touch with him. And he could have very reasonably told me, gee, Mark, I'd love to talk to you, but I kind of need to save these stories for the book that I'm writing about my own career. But he didn't do that. He went ahead and gave me an hour and 20-minute interview basically about the 4 films he did with dinosaurs, even though he was, working on his own book at that exact same time. So he was just incredibly unselfish.
Well, and to a fault, in many cases, because we tend to describe him as a special effects artist, but really he had his hand in every aspect of these films. These were his films. And he was producing, he was directing, he was responsible for much of the direction of the storyline and the script. But he stepped back and just wanted his name as a visual effects supervisor.
He designed just about every frame that went on film for all of his later, from the 50s, after the first 2 or 3. Very, very talented guy. The companion book to An Animated Life, which is a lot of that art, is truly an amazing thing to look through.
I had a chance to interview Desmond Davis a few years ago, who directed Clash of the Titans, and he talked a lot about what it was like to direct a Ray Harryhausen film, where you had this other artist with so much input onto it. And he said that he and Ray hit it off great. He said, I did what I did, and he did what he did, and we seemingly had this automatic understanding from day one, and there was never any friction. And to hear him tell it, I believe him. I think he was telling the truth. I don't think there was any friction. Well, then I talked to Judy Bowker, who had played Andromeda, and she corroborated that. She said that Desmond and Ray they were just like this. They each did what they needed to do and worked great together. So.
And there were a couple of exceptions to that, which really were not good experiences for Ray. Was it Wanji, the director, that tried to get him fired?
Connolly?
Yeah, and then he and Sam Wanamaker didn't want to be doing the Sinbad film in the first place. And so
that was not too good.
But in most, like Gordon Hessler, most of those directors worked beautifully collaborating with Ray.
And just specifically, kind of, in case you guys don't know what he would do, is he very elaborately would illustrate the scenes that he would later animate in the film. He would be on the set for the entire shoot of the film, and these directors would direct all the action, and then as soon as it got to the point where, all right, you're going to be interacting with Ray's animated stuff, the director would be like, all right, now Ray's the director, and he's gonna tell you where to look, what to do, and he would direct the actors for that. And then when they moved back to, scenes on board the ship with nothing, no special effects, then the director would go back and direct the actors and the crew. So he really was hands-on on the set as well as behind the scenes. He'd spend months after the initial shooting and production, then on the stage with the plates that they shot on location or in the soundstage, rear projected in front of the model, and he would, of course, advance frame by frame, animate the model, and composite it all together and make the amazing scenes that you see on the screen.
What's amazing to me is the way that with Walt Disney, you had an entire team of people doing the same thing that Ray did by himself. I mean, the storyboards, the designs, the creatures, animating them, matte paintings, and all that kind of stuff, and then, of course, the directing, too, and, but you look at a movie like Disney's Island to the Top of the World, and you gotta go, yeah, it's got some good points to it, but that's a whole team of people.
That's an army.
Yeah, it's an army, and it's like, it's not as
All
good
race
as like a
stuff.
Harryhausen
One guy in
film.
the dark room and a camera.
Yeah, yeah,
Nowadays, there's the credit rolling, for 10 minutes, all the hundreds of people that
yeah.
are involved in that.
There's the auteur theory that came out of the French New Wave, that the director is the author of the film, no matter who wrote it. And I think you can make the case that with Harryhausen, he's the auteur, he's the author of these films, especially after Mighty Joe Young.
Well, what do we call them? We call them Ray Harryhausen movies.
Yeah.
They're not,
Nathan Journey.
yeah, they're not Nathan movies or Desmond Davis movies or James O'Connell movies. They're Ray Harryhausen films.
Maybe we should mention for those that don't know it, you mentioned Mighty Joe Young. He actually grew up to work with his mentor. When he first saw King Kong, he was seeing the work of the great Willis O'Brien. And then he grows up and he's actually old enough to approach Willis O'Brien, who turns out to be just about as nice and open and receptive as Ray himself. So they hit it off perfectly well. And here is the wide-eyed kid, which he was throughout his whole life, working with the great Willis O'Brien on Mighty Joe Young, essentially the sequel to King Kong.
That's the thing about, too, I mean, not talking about Ray, but talking about King Kong, you just cannot stress enough the massive influence it is on so many people. It's Frazetta's favorite film, it's his favorite film, I mean, so many people. It's a pure 10, and of course, it's Ray Harryhausen's favorite film. But just even to this day, looking at it, anything from the matte paintings to just the giant scope is incredible. And I don't know if it was Ray's favorite film, but there's been, the list is as long as your arm, and of the top professionals that consider it the best film ever made.
Well, it is the best film.
It is.
Add Bill Stout to that list, right?
So if you're not aware, there's a small company called Twilight Time, and they do deluxe limited edition Blu-ray and DVDs, and they did the most spectacular job on Mysterious Island. It is absolutely stunning. It's like seeing it for the first time. The color is so rich, it's just gorgeous.
Beautiful restoration.
Plus, you get a completely isolated Bernard Herrmann soundtrack. It's included on the disc as well.
Now that he's teased you with that, none of you can buy it, because it came out and there was like 3,000 copies, and it sold like within days. And that's like, we're not gonna be making any more, at least not for a long time. It's
Checking
like the
eBay.
dumbest, yeah.
Check
checking
eBay
eBay.
and Amazon, there's
But
some
it's
Amazon
expensive.
sellers.
I mean, I've seen it go on for 75 and up,
So here's another footnote for you. You know how John Williams' music adds so incredibly much to the Star Wars series and all the other great films with Spielberg that he worked on. Bernard Herrmann worked with Ray Harryhausen on many films. So that incredible score is just underscoring all of that incredible visual effects work. So it's a double punch that you get here.
when I was taking my kids back and forth to their little day school before they actually started regular school, they got to a point where they were finally saying every time we got in the car, "Dad, can we play the giant crab music now?" Those are my kids. Put it on,
Well done, sir.
Yeah.
It's in the DNA.
That is a very fine film, and we all love James Mason as Captain Nemo, and 20,000 Leagues, but Herbert Baum is an excellent.
He is, he's
Nemo
good,
in
yeah.
Mysterious Island.
Yeah.
He had another sad loss this year.
That's right,
Yes.
exactly.
It's
Yes.
kind of amazing. I knew he was still alive, but it's like he was ancient.
Yeah, so.
Because he looked like he was in his 50s back in the 1950s.
Yeah.
So, yeah, unfortunately, I always loved him as Captain Nemo as well.
Yeah.
That's a very underseen film, I think, by a lot of.
I think in some ways, the designs on the suits that they brought out, the giant seashell was actually, was
yeah.
up to Disney by a notch, you know. Didn't have the budget, but, you know, just those little like seashell helmets and everything, I thought that was pretty inventive.
Why don't all of us kind of, starting with Terry and coming back this way, what's your favorite film and/or if it's not contained in the favorite film, your favorite creature with the Ray design and animated?
Well, my favorite Harryhausen film was the first one I saw in the theater, which was The Golden Voyage of Sinbad. And I just still think it's just so good. The music, the Miklos Rozsa music is terrific. John Philip Law, who I got to know, was a super nice guy and loved being Sinbad and wanted to be Sinbad in the second one, but they didn't ask him. I think he's perfect physically, and he does the accent, and gives it that kind of Mediterranean feel. Caroline, I fell in love with, and we all love, and who's such a sweetheart, many of us know. And then Tom Baker is the villain, and the script is so intelligent. The script is so wonderful, and the photography is so great, and it's some of Ray's best animation. And I saw that maybe 6 times in the theater, and it remains my favorite Harryhausen film. But I have to say my favorite Harryhausen creature, what I saw on television not long after that, would be the Emir. I love the Emir, and I love that film, and to me that's Ray's Kong, because it follows, basically that same sort of skeletal structure and that same theme. And I just absolutely love the Emir, and it just breaks my heart what happens to him at the end of that.
It's so hard for me to pick one favorite Harryhausen movie, but I guess if you go by the criteria, the one I probably watched the most, it's The Valley of Gwangi. I mean, I'm dinosaurs, and that movie just contains some of the most amazing dinosaur animation ever done. And another thing about Ray's work that we've kind of touched on is that's absolutely incredible is the interaction that he was able to create between the animated creatures and the real on-set props and people. And I think the epitome of that is the scene where the young Allosaurus invades the caveman's camp in 1 million years BC. The interconnection between that creature and all the stuff on the set, the ground, the little thatched hut, the spears. I mean, and the creature, if you watch the scene, the creature will be on this side of the frame, and you'll see cavemen over here. And without a cut, eventually the creature will be apparently walking on the same ground the cavemen were walking on 10 seconds earlier. And the scene where he tears up the little thatched shelter. I mean, even though you know that the creature was this big and was animated probably 6 months later than the guys did the live action, it's just incredible. I mean, I'm out of words, and so probably The Valley of Gwangi is my favorite movie, but I love Golden Voyage of Sinbad. I have a soft spot for It Came From Beneath the Sea for some reason. Kenneth Tobey and Faith DeMurg, along with all the great Harryhausen octopus scenes. But so I didn't answer the question.
I can't answer the question. It's just Valley of the Gwangi, Mysterious Island, and First Men in the Moon. But then you sit there and go, then you say if you're going to hand something over to an audience, it's like none of you have ever seen the Harryhausen film. I'd have to say you guys got to watch Jason and the Argonauts. I mean, to me, that's his. So it's not a fair question.
My favorite one is Seven Voyages of Sinbad with the Mysterious Island is a close second. Favorite creature, that's really tough because I love that massive skeleton fight in Jason, where each little skeleton has a personality.
Only had to pick one of the skeletons. So.
Number 5 and number 6.
And then the Cyclops is so incredible.
Cyclops is like it's almost its own.
Oh my God! And Talos, the big bronze giant.
Oh,
Just the way he, the sound on that, the creak when he turns and stuff, and those hollow eyes, it's fantastic.
And as far as the creature, once again, not fair, but Shiva to me really does it with the Miklos Rozsa score going full blast and the arms going all over the place. that, I never get tired of watching that scene, so, yeah.
Medusa's awesome too.
Yeah.
Just a little thing about Jason and the Argonauts, when at the technical Oscars, where Ray Bradbury presented a Life Achievement Award to Ray Harryhausen. Tom Hanks was the MC, and when they finally had concluded and left the stage, he stepped to the microphone and he said, "Some people say Casablanca, some people say Citizen Kane. I say Jason and the Argonauts is the greatest motion picture ever made."
The guy from Seinfeld said that too. I mean, he came on and hosted it one night on like TNT or something.
Yeah.
And he came out in a costume and everything with a sword.
Yeah, Jerry Seinfeld is a closet fan.
It wasn't Seinfeld, it was the guy. not-
Jason Alexander.
Jason
Oh,
Alexander, yeah.
okay, well, he
Yeah.
Jason himself.
He is. But my favorite, I guess, would really be Mysterious Island. There's so many surprises there.
It's a mystery.
You're ready, yeah, exactly. You're ready for dinosaurs, to show up, or giant octopi or something, but, there's a giant chicken, oh my God, it's a baby giant chicken. Holy cow, what are we gonna do with it, and then at one point, a crab appears, and then going around, and it turns out the crab was a real crab.
Yeah,
They couldn't, they weren't happy with the footage that they were getting from the tests of trying to do a crab with the traditional means that they would sculpting the crab things. And so they finally just went to the grocery store and bought an actual crab from the seafood department and put the armatures inside of it and so forth. And then later on, Ray said, Alfred Hitchcock would be very pleased because after a hard day of shooting, we ate our actors.
My favorite movie it's really hard to choose, but I would say Jason the Argonauts and probably Seventh Voyage. And favorite creature, I love the Cyclops, but it's got to be Mighty Joe for me. I mean, because Ray really did most of the animation for Mighty Joe Young, and he really is the one who imbued Mighty Joe Young's personality. He's the one who came up with that frustrated hitting the ground and some of the other things that Joe does that are just so distinct, and make him such a lovable character. And I saw that. I think that it was probably not the first Harryhausen work that I saw, but it was certainly very early on and made a big impression on me. So, yeah.
I'm glad Mark mentioned First Men in the Moon too, because I had been fairly indifferent to that film until I saw a big screen screening of it at the Egyptian with Ray there, and seeing it on the big screen was a revelation. It was a total revelation. It's so give it another chance.
Yeah.
Anthony, I probably interrupted you.
No, you absolutely didn't.
But
And I was going to say, we
what's
just
your
had a
favorite
screening about a year and a half ago here in Atlanta as part of the Silver Screen Spook Show down at the Plaza Theater, and that was the first time I'd ever seen it on a big screen. And it really is a different experience.
To me, it's one of the Harryhausen films too, where the non-Ray director did a really good job with the actors. That's why I like Wanji a lot too, is because they did a good job with the character development. And some of the films you'll watch.
Richard Carlson's really good.
Yeah, you'll watch some of the films, and it's almost like Ray's direction and his creatures outshine the other director's work.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I hate to say that. Nobody attacked me afterwards, but it's just really, there's a few of them where you kind of go, oof.
But we've got about 15 minutes or so left. Should we take some questions from the audience or remembrances of Ray? Because this is a tribute panel, so if you guys have stories about meeting Ray or how his work has affected you, yes, sir.
Well, not so much a story, but just to make sure, curious as the panel knows more details, but I really, really enjoyed the recent documentary, Ray Harryhausen, special effects type.
Right. So
Wonderful to see, but I've not heard about a U.S. release for that yet. Has anyone heard anything? 'Cause
I haven't heard anything either.
Or nothing.
It's been shown at a couple of festivals and conventions, but
Yeah, no,
here
it's
on
well worth
in the
seeking out
States.
for anyone if you can play a region 2 disc. It's a wonderful set.
It really is.
Yes, sir.
You were talking earlier about the Allosaurus attack and how well that was done with the actors moving around and everything. And And going back to the Valley of the Ganges, I just love the idea of lassoing the Tyrannosaurus Rex and fighting with the horses. That was amazing.
Yeah. I had to watch some of that real close where does the real lasso come in and where does Ray's little miniature lasso come in? Because in doing this illustration, I was like all over this film, watching it like 5 times in 1 week. And I'm like, trying to see where the person, the real reality stops and Ray takes over, and it's
Pull the
tough.
horses
And
down.
I was thinking that's just his own logistical problem, logistical nightmare, lining that stuff up. But he did it,
Clearly, he enjoyed the challenge. That was, I can't even imagine. That's one of the scenes that you look at and you just go, how is it possible to have, and I've seen the original footage, there's a post there that they're lassoing and stuff.
Right.
It was like a post mounted to a Jeep.
Yeah.
So the
But
cowboys
it's-
would actually have something to aim for when they were throwing the lasso.
But it's such an amazing thing to look at the composite footage, and it does, it looks
The
pretty
Guangi's
seamless.
kicking up dust. and
Right.
Yeah.
The dust seems to flow from his feet and then come out all the way past the cowboy. The integration just never ceases to amaze.
Yeah.
He had a very visual memory, apparently, maybe a photographic memory, you might say, because he apparently kept a lot of this stuff sort of in his head.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how else he would have kept notes on it.
Certainly working a frame at a time. I mean, he had gauges that they would use, that he would use, and occasionally they got left into the shot. So you can, if you slow it down and look at
Frame by frame.
there's occasionally the little odd gauge that got left into the shot. But it was still, the gauge was just to measure how far he had moved, whatever limb he was doing. If you think about something like the Hydra from Jason the Argonaut,
That's the
it
one.
had
Wow.
8 heads going. And, the skeletons, yeah, unbelievable how you could, the computing power in a brain
I know.
could keep track of all.
Well, I mean, it's like one thing, he decided he was gonna do this, like you said, he liked the challenge. My thing is, if you had brought some guy in off the street who was fairly good at that kind of stuff, and said, we want you to do that, the guy would have just taken out a gun and shot himself in the head. Because I just look at that and I go, how in the devil?
Well, and you gotta understand too, that some of these things, he could only shoot maybe a minute and a half a day at like the fastest he could possibly go.
Yeah.
And that's like maybe one figure interacting with some other stuff. On something like the Hydra, he might shoot 25 seconds or 30 seconds in a day, and he had to leave that in the camera
Remember where he left
and
off.
remember where he left off when he came back the next day. And he might have done that for a week before he ever saw the film process. And if he had screwed up, he had to go back and do a week's worth over.
Sorry, Mr. Harryhausen, somebody opened the door while we were processing.
You can imagine.
One of the stories about the Hydra is that he's told several times in interviews, he said finally had to take the phone off the hook, because every time the phone would ring, I would get involved with the call and then come back to the Hydra, and then I was thinking, now which head was I animating? So he was clearly keeping it in his head.
That's great.
Both the skeleton sequence in Jason and the roping sequence in Guanji, just those 2 scenes, he said, took about 4 months each,
Yeah.
start to finish.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering if there are places where we can see some of these models now that he's no longer around to take them to conventions.
They had, I think it was a Museum of the Moving Picture out in LA, or was it the MPAA? There was an exhibit that was there, and I think has moved to London now, at the London Film Museum.
Because Ray the Moving Image in London had them for a while.
If you're on Facebook, go to Facebook and like the Ray and Diana Harryhausen Foundation page, and you can really follow what's being done in terms of preserving Ray's legacy through that foundation, working closely with Diana and his daughter Vanessa.
Right, that's the best.
Real quick, the DVDs and Blu-rays that are no longer available but were so evilly suggested, what was the name of them? Twilight Time, okay.
They also did that with Journey to the Center of the Earth, which made me mad.
You mentioned the Medusa, which is incredible, and Ray has said, and he didn't like to talk in details, that there were several reasons why he decided to retire.
But they're gonna have the CGI characters, because obviously only a madman would try and do it with puppets at this point. And I think, as far as stop motion coming back, stop motion, to some degree, and I hesitate to call it replaced, it was not replaced but it was enhanced by Go Motion. And that kind of got rid of, actually, Phil didn't create that, although he was part of the guys that did bring it out. But it got rid of the strobing effect by adding actual motion during the frame capture. So if it came back at all, it would be Go Motion, I would imagine at this point.
Dragon
Not a
Slayer.
special effect, but it certainly seems stop motion features have been on the rise. It seems like we get at least one a year. They often,
Yeah, that's where I
dark,
think.
things like Paranorman,
Yeah.
and I think that
Oh,
comes.
Coraline.
and
Walls and
Coraline.
Armament
Christmas
Productions
and stuff,
Yeah,
very
it's
silent.
as
Yeah.
effects, but we're
Art-
still
art.
seeing that process.
Yeah, I think that's where stop motion will survive, is in things like that. It's never gonna be used again in, you know, the
To create
Valley of
realistic
Orange type
spec-
style,
yeah,
to put,
special effects.
to put fantastic creatures into an otherwise live action film. I don't think we'll see that anymore.
Mike say Tim Burton is one that's trying to keep it alive.
Yeah.
And the Kyoto brothers,
Yes, yes, exactly.
they've never stopped.
Yes.
Did Ray Harryhausen and others mention any interest in John Carter of Mars?
Oh, he was a big Burroughs fan,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, I think it's a shame he never got to do a Burroughs
Yeah.
property, because he did love Burroughs, and he was such a tremendous impact.
Time for one more question or
Yeah.
story?
I got one. What were the models actually made out of?
They were milled aluminum for the armatures, and then like occasionally steel for some of the joints and things like that. And then they were like foam, like poured foam latex, and covered with paint and latex. For the most part, I mean, like the crab was actual crab. But that was mainly what they were made of.
And he recycled some of those models too.
Sure.
You know, out of financial necessity.
Did
So
he
feel
actually
he
do all
did
the
survive.
machining and everything?
His dad started, and then after his dad passed away, I think they hired some guys in the shop to do it. But yeah, his father kind of really pioneered the kind of armature that he needed after having seen some of the stuff that Obi was working on.
His father must have been a real expert machinist, because that's very, very fine
Think about
work.
some of the
Yeah.
little sockets in some of the fingers, because each one was represented, and some of these creatures that were, certainly I've never seen, I've seen about 8 or 10 or 12 of them, and none of them were over 18 inches high. So they were, the joint and hand would have been very fine. It's pretty amazing.
He told me in an interview one time, and I found this so touching, he said, you know, you don't really consider the importance of so many things, even if you're sensitive and loving to your family. He said, if I could have one wish, it would be 5 minutes with my mom and dad to tell them again how much I appreciated what all they did for me.
Being more to your question now.
I just wondered if you guys had seen the documentary Sci-Fi Boys.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed Harryhausen's work and a lot of his movies and stuff, but I
That was
never
fun.
got to see him speak, and it was interesting, some of the contemporary, actors and directors and stuff, and hearing how that's why they
Peter
really are in
Jackson
the
and those guys
business.
talking about how much of an influence it raised him, yeah.
Another documentary, and it's on several of the DVDs that you've probably seen, is the Harryhausen Chronicles, which Richard Schickel did, and it's got some terrific stuff in it. And it has what may be one of my favorite sequences, Harryhausen sequences, that's not in a film, is the War of the Worlds.
Yeah.
The Martian he did for War of the Worlds,
Yeah.
the test footage, that is just terrific. This whimsical Martian.
Well, I think we're just about out of time.
Just about out of time, yeah.
If you guys want to go down and tell everybody where, if you want to see more of us online, my website, for instance, is taylorcosm.com. And you can keep up with some of the articles and books that I do. What about you, Mike?
Well, I'm doing a lot on Facebook now, but also just all over the net in different places. I don't really have one website that I stick with, but keep an eye out for, at other conventions, you might see me at a cabaret performing.
My website's williamstout.com, pretty easy to remember, and I'm here over at the second floor of America's Mart, tables 13 and 14.
And how long will you be up there, Bill?
All day.
Okay.
My website where you can see a lot of my illustrations is at maddoxplanet.com. And I'm also up on Facebook, so if anybody wants to Facebook friend me, please do. I'm Mark Maddox in Athens, Georgia.
I don't have a website, as my brother, who's an IT guy, keeps reminding me. But I'm on Facebook, and so you can find, if you're interested in the dinosaur filmography, the history of dinosaur films, it's still available from Amazon and just about any place, any online bookseller has it. And, so it's easy to find.
I don't have a website either, but you can find me on Facebook, and it's Terry Pace, and there's a photo of me with Ray Bradbury there, so it's easy to identify. You'll recognize Ray if you don't recognize me. And then also the film group that Ray Bradbury and I co-founded, Pillar of Fire. We have a page there, and there's a lot of great Harryhausen, Bradbury, and Ackerman stuff there as well.
Thanks so much for coming
Thank
out.
And hope we'll see you again next year.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'll see you later.
Oh, can I get a picture of that?
Thanks, guys.
Quick photo.
Yeah, thank you. That's 601, right? I'll be, if I can, if I don't like that toy thing, I'll come see it.
What's the numbers, yeah.
You know where you're going with Courtney? You know where you're going with?
Yeah, I'm going to,
Everybody smile and say Guanchi.
It is the one where you're
Dr. A's toy box.
I think I turned that.
Don't do that.
All right.
I'll use that flash. Thinks he's attacking the girl.
Yeah, really.
Remember what those flash bulbs did to King Kong?
Oh, it's a swell picture.
I was one of my here and right here.
So years ago when